Welcome everyone to Heritage Kitchener June 2024 meeting, and I'd like to welcome Deanna, who is going to be the official clerk for this meeting this time. And as you heard, Marilyn Mills will be changing her role, and Mariah Blake will be coming back in September or August, I guess, to do the clerk's work. So we have been given the edict that we need to be done at 6 o'clock. However, I looked at the agenda, and I do believe that we probably will be finished this time. Again, welcome everyone, and we do have quorum, so it's 4 o'clock. We will start. Is there anyone who has to disclose a pecuniary interest regarding any of the matters listed on the agenda? Any? Seeing none, thank you. We'll now proceed to the discussion items. Our first item, 4.1, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2024-009, 36 Lancaster Street East, demolition and reconstruction of Rare Edition. And Michelle Drake, our Senior Heritage Planner, will provide a brief presentation and overview. And I see we do have an agent for the applicant here, Austin Zhang. Is that Austin? Thank you. So I'll call on you after Michelle has made her presentation. Thank you. All right, Michelle, please go ahead.
Through you, Chair, I'll just clarify that Austin is here. If there's questions of committee to him, he does not have a presentation to provide. As the Chair noted, we are here this evening to review Heritage Permit Application HPA 2024 Roman numeral 5009 for 36 Lancaster Street East. The subject property is located within the Civic Centre Neighbourhood Heritage Conservation District, which is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The district plan indicates that the demolition of building or portions of building that are visible from the street or other public space require heritage permits. The rear addition is visible from both Lancaster Street East and Mansion Street. Furthermore, Section 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act requires a property owner to obtain approval from council to demolish or remove any building or structure or part thereof. So this is not an item that can proceed through delegated approval after the committee makes a recommendation. It will have to go to council. The applicant is proposing to demolish the rear yard addition that sustained extensive fire damage in 2023. As required by the policies of the district plan, the applicant has provided documentation justifying the reasons for demolition. This documentation includes a building permit to repair structural damage sustained during the fire, accompanied by a document, essentially a structural assessment of the fire damaged building, which was prepared by Brown and Beatty Building Science Engineering and dated March 21st, 2024. And Austin, who is here this evening, is from Brown and Beatty Building Science Engineering. The applicant is also proposing to reconstruct the rear addition to match the size and appearance of the rear addition prior to the fire. The addition will match the existing footprint, location, and design of the rear addition, including materials and colors. In reviewing the merits of the application, the subject property is located within the Civic Centre Neighbourhood Heritage Conservation District and therefore designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The proposal to demolish the rear addition has been justified in the document, the structural assessment, prepared by Brown and Beatty, dated March 21st, 2024. The proposal to reconstruct the rear addition will match the size and appearance of the addition before the fire. The proposal is in keeping with the Civic Center Neighborhood Heritage Conservation District Plan policies for demolitions and new additions, included recommended practices and design guidelines for additions. And finally, the proposal will not detract from the character of the property, the integrity of the Lancaster Street East streetscape, nor the Civic Center Neighborhood Heritage Conservation District. As a result, staff is recommending that pursuant to Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2024 Roman numeral 5009 be approved to permit the demolition of the fire-damaged rear addition and reconstruction of the rear addition on the subject property municipally addressed as 36 Lancaster Street East in accordance with the supplementary information submitted with the application and subject to the following standard condition: that final building permit drawings be reviewed and heritage clearance provided by heritage planning staff prior to issuance of the required building permits. And that's all I have at this time, through you, Chair.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, we do have, as I mentioned earlier, the agent for the applicant, Austin Zhang, and he is here to answer any questions. Are there any questions for Austin regarding the proposal? Seeing none, then I will ask, yes, Councillor Chapman. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is for the I forget, I didn't catch your name. For the representative from the developer or the owner. I just wonder if you could sort of describe the material that you will be using in the rebuilding of this, the part that's to be demolished.
Austin, would you please come to the mic and lean into the mic and talk right into the mic so we can hear? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So basically, most of the material we're going to use is the pressure-treated wood lumbers to replace the joist, stump wall, partition wall, exterior wall, and ceiling joists. And also, we're planning to use aluminum vinyl-framed window as a window replacement, and also wood-stained sidings to match the existing size and the appearance. So most of the material used would be wood and vinyl.
The aluminum windows, are they currently in the rest of the house, aluminum windows?
Yes, because the rear addition of this building was built approximately 40 years ago, so it's actually a relatively new construction, basically. So the original construction was using aluminum framed windows, and that's why we're still using the same material. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman and Austin. I see no other questions. Thank you. All right, so I will now call for someone to move the recommendation. If the application receives unanimous consent from the committee, it can be processed under delegated approval authority following the committee meeting. And otherwise, it would proceed or will proceed to council June 24th. Now, Michelle Drake has read the recommendation in the staff report.
Through you, Chair, can I just interject? It cannot be dealt with under delegated approval because it's a demolition.
Thank you very much. I wondered about that. All right. So, Michelle, what you're saying, it will have to go to June 24th council? Yes. Thank you. So, Austin, you heard that. It will be going, whatever the decision is, June 24th council. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. All right. Michelle did outline the recommendation clearly in her presentation, so I don't feel I have a need to read it one more time. So, who would move this recommendation? Thank you, Alona. Any other questions, comments? Alona, please.
I would just like to comment on how this is now, like they're not tearing down this house, although it was in a looks like a major fire. So I just want to really express appreciation to the owner for following through and really respecting the Heritage District Plan and trying to bring this asset back and basically just trying to bring it back to what it was before. So really, really appreciate that. And it does maintain the character of the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Alona. And I too, as I read the information, was most impressed that the owner would take on the project of redoing the house and keeping it. Thank you. So Alona has moved the recommendation, and no more questions, comments. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is 4.2, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2024 IV-010. This is a property, 50 Brookside Crescent, and for those of you wondering where that is up in the Forest Heights area. It is a lovely stone house. What is being asked for is replacement of existing cedar shingle roof with new shingles, DSD 2024-255. Jessica Vera, Heritage Planner, will provide a brief presentation and overview. Jessica, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, and as noted, this is a heritage permit application for 50 Brookside Crescent, designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act and recognized for its design and contextual value. So the proposed work is for the replacement of existing cedar shingle roof with a new cedar shingles in a natural cedar color. The existing roof is at the end of its lifespan and is in poor condition and allowing for leaks into the interior of the home. In reviewing the merits of this application, it should be noted that cedar shingles are an identified heritage attribute within the designating bylaw, but the existing cedar shingle roof is not believed to be original to the house, as they do have a lifespan of 30 to 50 years, and there's previous photo documentation which display green shingles approximately 60 years ago, so this is not an original roof system as is. The existing material being proposed maintains the same shape as the existing roof and is an appropriate material, and it will address the leaks and prevent further damage to the interior of the home. So Heritage Planning staff are recommending approval of this proposal. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, and we do not have a delegation. Fine. Will this, if I may ask, will this be a delegated approval if we unanimously decide to approve it? Jessica?
Yes, Madam Chair, it would.
Thank you. So the recommendation that pursuant to Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2024 IV-010 be approved to permit the replacement of the existing cedar shingle roof with new cedar shingles on the property municipally addressed as 50 Brookside Crescent. So could I have someone move the recommendation? Thank you, Donnie. Any further questions for staff? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimously. Thank you. And now we're coming to 4.3 on the agenda, and how we're going to work on this item. There are, as you can see on your agenda, there are 2 items associated with 236 Gale Place. And we're going to work on both of them, but vote on separately. So we will now begin. 4.3, the first part of it is notice of intention to demolish, which is a partial demolition at 236 Gale Place. And I would ask, Michelle Drake, Senior Heritage Planner, to provide a brief overview and presentation of the both items. May I just ask for clarification? On my agenda notes here, we have notice of intention to designate, but I do believe that has been revised, is it not?
Through you, Chair, yes, the revised recommendation will be provided both in this presentation and was provided via the memo sent out to the committee yesterday.
Thank you. All right, Michelle, would you proceed then, please? And you're going to do the 2 items, correct?
Through you, Chair, that's correct.
All right.
Okay, so I will start with the notice of intention to demolish, the partial demolition at 236 Gale Place. The Development Services Department is in receipt of a notice of intention to demolish. The notice was received on April 26, 2024, along with a scoped heritage impact assessment and later a scoped revised heritage impact assessment dated May 14, 2024. The subject property is municipally addressed as 236 Gale Place. It is located on the south side of Bleems Road between Fisher-Hallman Road and Trussler Road and contains a circa 1860 log house with 3 additions. It is recognized for design, physical, historical, associative, and contextual values as identified in the Statement of Significance associated with its listing as a non-designated property of cultural heritage value or interest on the city's municipal heritage register. The purpose of the notice and the revised scoped heritage impact assessment is to facilitate the proposed demolition of 3 building additions to the log house on the subject property in order to thoroughly document, evaluate, and provide conservation recommendations for the original log house via a future heritage impact assessment. This slide shows one of the 2 circa 1960 additions that are proposed to be demolished, and the bright arrow is pointing to that 1960 addition. This second slide shows the remaining additions. So essentially on both sides of the house, you see a 1-story additions with a flat roof. Those are estimated to have circa 1960 construction dates. And then the middle gable roof line has a circa 1920, 1930 date of construction. The revised scoped HIA evaluated the cultural heritage value or interest of the additions to the log house, not the log house itself, on the subject property using Ontario Regulation 906. A summary of that evaluation was provided in Table 1 of Staff Report DSD 2024-243, which was provided in the agenda package, but for which I will provide a revised recommendation later in this presentation. These are the standard slides that we share with the committee, and you can see that the evaluation concluded that there was not design physical value related to the 3 additions. There was not historical associative value associated with the 3 additions, and there was not contextual value associated with the 3 additions. Prior to demolition of the building additions, this scoped HIA indicates that the additional studies will be submitted to the city. These additional studies include a demolition, stabilization, and temporary protection plan, including a structural assessment, risk management plan, a hoarding and construction plan, and a vibration monitoring plan. These are studies that we have been requiring since about 2015, particularly with respect to properties that are undergoing planning processes and where buildings are proposed to be removed. These studies are required to be submitted prior to June 24th, 2024, or as per the terms of the Heritage Conservation Covenant or easement agreement. And again, a revised recommendation for council to authorize entering into such agreement will be presented a little later in my presentation. The proposed demolition of the building additions will help facilitate a detailed evaluation of the entire log house to provide conservation options to be addressed in a future heritage impact assessment. This is for a site alteration permit process and any future Planning Act applications. A future heritage impact assessment will be required to identify the conservation options and recommend a preferred conservation option based on federal, provincial, and municipal policies, guidelines, and best practices. Heritage planning staff agree that the additions to the log house do not meet Ontario Regulation 906 criteria for determining cultural heritage value or interest under the Ontario Heritage Act. As such, heritage planning staff support the demolition of these additions, subject to confirmation via additional studies that the demolition removal of these additions will not negatively impact the structural integrity and or heritage attributes of the original log house. In this regard, heritage planning staff agree with the recommendation in the revised scoped heritage impact assessment that prior to demolition of the additions to the log house, a demolition, stabilization, and temporary protection plan should be submitted. The notice period will be complete on June 24th, 2024. And again, a revised recommendation for council to consider the agreements will be presented later in my presentation. So the recommendation for the first item, which is 4.3, is that in accordance with Section 27.3 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the notice of intention to demolish partial received on April 26, 2024 regarding the two circa 1920-1930 additions and the one circa I mixed that up. The one circa 1920-1930 edition and the two circa 1960 editions located on the property municipally addressed as 236 Gale Place be received for information and that the notice period run its course. I'll continue with the presentation and offer the second recommendation for the committee to understand the two applications that are before the committee this evening. So I have put the entire revised recommendation up here. This recommendation is replacing my earlier recommendation that referenced designating the property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So this recommendation reads that pursuant to Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act, City Council authorized the entering into of a Heritage Conservation Covenant or easement agreement with the owner of 236 Gale Place in a form and content satisfactory to the City Solicitor and the City's Director of Development and Housing Approvals. And then second, that the draft bylaw dated June 10th, 2024, attached to the memo that you received yesterday as Appendix A, to allow the city to enter into this type of agreement with the owner. I will just say 236 Gale Place. I will not spell out that legal description. And that property for the conservation of the log house be adopted. So a bit of an explanation around that recommendation. 236 Gale Place is a two-story mid-century log structure built in the Georgian architectural style. The property is listed on the city's municipal heritage register. A reevaluation has concluded that the subject property meets 5 of 9 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act Regulation 906 and amended by Ontario Regulation 56922. An updated statement of significance was drafted and appended to DSD, or to Staff Report DSD 2024-261. This work was undertaken, 1, as a response to a site alteration permit that requests permission to grade the subject property, which will require the log house to be relocated elsewhere on the subject property, and 2, as part of the city's municipal heritage review initiated in February of 2023 in response to Bill 23's deadline to designate listed properties before December 31st of 2024. Bill 200, the Homeowner Protection Act 2024, was introduced on May 27th of 2024. It proposed to extend Bill 23's deadline to January 1st, 2027. I just want to clarify, I did have a typo in the memo in that I referenced December 31st, 2027. That timing is incorrect. My apologies. The correct extended deadline is January 1st, 2027. The bill did receive royal assent on June 6th, 2024. Heritage planning staff prepared DSD 2024-261 before Bill 2200 was introduced. With this new information, Heritage planning staff believe that an alternate tool can be used to conserve 236 Gale Place during the site alteration permit process. This tool is known as either a Heritage Covenant Agreement or a Heritage Easement Agreement. The city has used these types of agreements on other properties and has also sought input from municipal heritage planners across the province who have also used these agreements to conserve cultural heritage resources. The Heritage Conservation Covenant Agreement, or the Heritage Conservation Easement Agreement, will enable the city to legally protect the heritage attributes and cultural heritage significance of the log house under Section 37 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and outline obligations related but not limited to the partial demolitions and relocation of the log house, future redevelopment and rehabilitation of the log house, conservation principles, standards, and guidelines, maintenance, alterations, emergencies, prohibited activities, approvals, insurance, building demolition or rebuilding, and securing a letter of credit. Those are the types of items that can be included within the easement or the covenant or easement agreement. So I will circle back to the revised recommendation and read it once more and leave it on the screen, as it was not a part of the original agenda package. So the revised recommendation reads that pursuant to Section 37(1) of the Ontario Heritage Act, City Council authorized the entering into of a Heritage Conservation Covenant or Easement Agreement with the owner of 236 Gale Place in a form and content satisfactory to the City Solicitor and the City's Director of Development and Housing Approvals. That the draft bylaw dated June 10th, 2024, attached to the Development Services Department internal memo dated June 7th, 2024 as Appendix A to allow the city to enter into a heritage conservation covenant or easement agreement with the owner of the lands currently municipally addressed as 236 Gale Place for the conservation of the log house be adopted. Through you, Chair, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. Now I would like to have the delegations come before the committee. We have Yvonne Bender from Schlegel Holdings, Rob Anderson, and Heather Price, GSB Group, to speak to both of the items. So Vaughn, I'm assuming you're going to introduce the presentation.
I am. Thank you, Chair Halboom and members of the committee. It's my pleasure to take a few minutes tonight to talk about this project, and as well, with your indulgence, talk about a few other projects that we have undertaken working in collaboration with this committee and heritage staff and planning staff with the City of Kitchener. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Alex Robinson, who has done a lot of work on the preparation for getting us to this committee meeting, background work, design work. So I want to thank Alex for his efforts. Rob Anderson with Anderson Welsman Architects, our heritage architect. Heather Price, and Heather was supported by Richard Kelly Roots as well. Heather's going to make a few comments, as will Rob, but GSP Group is our planner on this file, and David Witzel from Witzel Dice Engineering, our structural engineer. Sorry, okay, I should have advanced the slides. So we have been working on 236 Gale Place for a couple of decades now. It's in an area of the City of Kitchener that's had uncertain planning future going back some ways, and of course that's not why we're here tonight. But I want to say that we facilitated access to the property during the Southwest Urban Area Study process, and I believe that was 2010, 2011. We did not oppose the listing of the property back in that day. That process led to the Rosenberg secondary planning exercise. Again, these lands were on the edge of Rosenberg, but this building has very much been in the conversation for quite some time. Sorry, I got to do two things at once here. I also was comment as well for those on the committee that maybe aren't familiar with Schlegel Urban Developments. We do a fair bit of development work in Southwest Kitchener. We've developed a project called the Williamsburg Town Center, which is a neo-traditional mixed-use project. We've tried to implement high urban design standards and approaches. Those are just a couple of renderings of some of our buildings at Williamsburg Town Center. And that work is supported by this consultant team that is here with me. I want to just comment on our first, I'll say, heritage project in the City of Kitchener, which dates back to 2005, 2006. This was a 450-ton stone structure on the edge of an extracted gravel pit site, which we rehabilitated into a residential subdivision community neighborhood. There's a picture of the house. I'll skip through these fast, but I'm happy to go slower if the committee is interested. So we embarked on the process of exploring relocation of this building in 2005 for somewhat similar reasons. It was sitting high on the edge of the gravel pit site, and we needed to lower the building in order to take that material and fill in the bottom of the gravel pit hole on the site. There's the building as we were working on preparing it for it wasn't really lifted, really it was supported, and the earth around it was lowered. We did, of course, the necessary vibration analysis and heritage conservation agreements and all of those things that Michelle has been speaking about that we will be embarking on going forward here. So very familiar with the process, and anticipating really experiencing the same type of exercise on this project. Just a couple of interesting pictures of the house getting ready to move, supported on 64 dollies that kept it level at all points in time as it traversed over a half a kilometer of a special road that we built to facilitate the moving of the house. We have a little video, but I won't show that tonight, but of the house actually in motion. It took 2 days to move it the distance. Then it was a new foundation, block foundation, poured, and then block was built underneath the structure after it was moved. And there it is in its final restoration state with a sympathetic, I would say, addition attached to it to facilitate, modern living. And it's once again a single-family home in this neighborhood. That was one of the plaques that was outside the project. On the top right corner is a picture of the Heritage Committee and Leon. I'm not sure if Michelle was there at that time, but before Michelle, her days. But they're celebrating together what we had achieved on, I think, a fairly unique project. We received a Mike Wagner Heritage Award. We've embarked on a project at our Wollaston development, which is at Fisher Holman and Huron Road, around 2008. Again, the same team, Rob Anderson, Witzel Dice, GSP Group, supporting us on this project. This house was estimated to weigh twice what the EB house weighed, 900 tons. It is very close to Fisher Holman Road, so if you drive past Huron Road roundabout heading south, you will see that house. On that project, we also worked on commemoration plans for a section of Plains Road, which was closed as it bisected the 175-acre farm into 2 triangles. And, the implementation of some of those details for Plains Road commemoration are actually just happening now, even though, and I can't read the date, but we agreed on the measures there, a decade ago, I'll say. Again, some pictures of the house in the state of repair in which we received it when we purchased the property. A non-sympathetic garage addition, which was, removed from the house with approvals, of course. Work to restore, and there it is today in its restored state. And here are a few pictures from the inside. This house had a beautiful, sort of, I'll say, untouched condition inside as well, which we were able to restore. Again, vibration monitoring and so on during our earth-moving operations, and how it looks today. This farmhouse sits on another property we have right at the intersection of Fisher Holman and Bleams Road. It is an Italianate, I think, style home. It was actually built by the Abram Clemens family, which, the road is named Abram Clemens in that community. They only owned it 4 years before it was purchased by the Hennifer family. And the Hennifer family occupied this log structure we're talking about tonight as well. So this is, unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of pictures of this house in our slide deck, but this is sitting on a future stage in our, what we now call Williamsburg Green project, which is to be registered in the future. We'll be entering into a covenant agreement on this house, I believe, at the time that we move ahead with registration at that stage. This happens to be a log structure that resides on our St. Jacobs Farmers Market project. This log structure is from a nearby farm. It did not reside at this precise location where it sits today, and it's got an interesting history. A couple of years after we acquired the St. Jacobs Farmers Market site, we were approached by the Mennonite Story, which had a museum and interpretive center located in the village of St. Jacobs for 20, 30 years. They were being displaced and they were looking for a home. And so we made this building available to them at no charge. And it has been the new headquarters for their interpretive center for, the Mennonite history. This building actually is in need of some repairs. We've had Witzel Dice and Rob Anderson look at this building as we consider what to do next with it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob to talk a bit more about this specific project.
Show me the button here. The forward one. That's where, okay. Thank you.
Do you want me to work it? So do you want me to press it?
No, it's okay. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name's Robert Anderson, and I am an architect and principal of Anderson Welsman Architects in Toronto. It's my great pleasure to be here with you this evening. The home that we have on order tonight, 236 Gale Place, you can see in the photograph to the right, which was taken by the Hennifer family, Bill Hennifer, in approximately 1960. I believe his father purchased the property in 1959, and there was a tenant farmer in the building from 1960 until 1966, when Bill Hennifer and his wife were married, and they moved into the property, and they were the last residents of the house and left in 2019. I'll just move along here. You can see the stucco porch on the front of this building and the log exposed on the sides of the building. And I'd like you to notice that there is no protrusion or dormer at the second floor level in this photograph. Michelle did such a good job in her presentation. I'm going to skip through some of these. This is just location of the south end of Gale Place off of Bleems Road and the area of the site which is subject to subdivision. There's a blow-up of that same aerial, and it's a schematic, really. Just for orientation, the green square represents the original log home, and the red 3 squares represent the additions. The addition to the right and the addition to the left are the 1960 additions that were constructed by Bill Hennifer and his father Edward. And the addition in the center is, we believe, 1920s to 1930s addition. We believe that because of the nature of the construction, being full dimension 2x4 framing, and because of the residual stucco finish, which is on the outside, which came into fashion in this area starting in the 1920s. So it's no older than that. It might be a little bit younger. This is simply a diagram showing from the arborist's report indicating that there are trees around the building. The next few slides are just the plans. This is the main floor plan. As the Hennifers used the house, the log home is towards the bottom of the page there. And it had the dining room and family room, formal living room, and a bedroom in the lower left-hand corner, and significantly a washroom in the upper right-hand corner. Then the additions across the back start on the left as a garage, then a utility room, then the 1920s addition, which was used as a kitchen, and the 1960 addition of a sunroom on the east side of the building. There were 2 cellars, there are 2 cellars, one under the main house, which was fairly shallow, but Bill Hennifer informed me that he and his teenage sons dug out the basement, and they had a professional underpin to deepen the basement back in probably around 1980. There is a cellar under the 1920s addition, but no cellar under the 1960s additions. There is a second level. It's kind of a cottage style, low roof. The log home had 4 bedrooms in it. And you can see at the bottom of the page there a door leading out to the top of the porch roof. Now, the 1920s edition had a bedroom in it, and you can see a series of closets that have been added in the low headroom areas. This is the house from the north side, as we saw it in March this year, covered in a white or almost white aluminum siding that was installed by the Hennifers back in 1960. This elevation shows the additions. Anything with a flat roof is the 1960s addition. The pitched roof in the center is the 1920 edition, and in the background there you can just see the roof of the log home. This is the east elevation, showing the log home with the chimney on it, and the additions, the sunroom addition to the right there, the 1920s addition higher up on the right-hand side. This is south elevation of the original log home. You can see the dormer from the second floor that Bill Hennifer and his wife added. It wasn't to enjoy the porch roof, they tell me. It was their concern of being trapped in a fire because of the old age of the wood. And the windows are quite small. To the left there, you see the one-story garage addition. Again, the garage addition. And now the investigation begins, and we had the bottom 6 feet or so of the aluminum siding removed, and you can begin to see the log showing its face there. This is the log as it is on the south side and on the west side of the log home. And you can see that it's in quite good shape. In fact, there's quite a tawny appearance to the log. It's remarkable, actually. And there's plenty of original chinking material there, which Michelle will back me up, that we tore apart and found horsehair in the mortar. Again, this is the north elevation, now with all of the siding removed. The next few slides will show that. The east elevation with all the siding removed. South elevation, similar. Again, we wanted to see all of the logs because unlike a masonry building, the quality of the material can deteriorate as it gets into wet areas. And so being able to expose them all is quite important to an evaluation. This is the west elevation and garage, 1960s garage. You can even see up in the gable end that the boarding at the gable is in quite good condition. So this is refers back to the original schematic drawing that shows what we propose to take down. The red are the additions, and the green is the original log home. The next few slides are a couple of details just showing the quality of those logs and the quality of the additions. They're quite large. Some of those logs are 20 inches deep. Typically, they're about 12 or 14 inches. Pardon me, 14 inches. This is the 1960s garage addition. You can tell the difference in construction here. The interior of the utility room, which the garage wall is on the left-hand side, and the 1920s addition on the right-hand side. This is the sunroom. You can tell by the large window there on the left, the 1920s addition on the right, and the log home at the back of the room. You can also see a remnant of the stucco that would have covered the 1920s edition.
Rob, we appreciate your in-depth work. I wonder if you could move through the slides and
Certainly, Madam
conclude
Chair. Appreciate
your
the time.
presentation here.
That's a detail of the stucco for those who are interested. The interior of the 1920s edition ground floor, interior of the log home, looking to the towards the front door. There is a bedroom in the back there that has original finishes in it. Detail of the floor where we believe original stairs were located down to the cellar and up to the second level. Detail of an opening that was cut by the Hennefers to permit a bathroom, interior bathroom. Second floor of the 1920s addition. Second floor of the log home. There was no original plaster left except what you see in the corridor, but all of that lath appears to be original. And you can see in the floor a different change of material where we believe stairs used to come up, the original stairs. And again, a detail of the second floor. And finally, indication of when the renovation was done, pardon me, for the interior, February 12th of 1972. There was a preliminary report prepared by my colleague David Witzel regarding the structural analysis of the home. He is convinced that there is no reliance of the log home on the additions, and therefore their removal would not harm the original log home. And there are minor preparations to be done. As in this image, the openings would be infilled and reinforced prior to the demolition.
Thank you, Rob. I'm going to have to call your time now.
All right. Thank
And the committee, if they have questions, they will pose them to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think we have just about extended the time, but I sense there is one more person here, Heather Price. I don't know if you had something to say in about 1 minute, 2 minutes in summary, if you don't mind. And then I would like the opportunity for the committee to ask you questions. So, Heather.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members, staff. If you will indulge me, I'll try to keep it brief. My remarks are largely around the process. Typically, you would see a submission like this, and this would come before you in the context of a planning approvals process. And indeed, that is to come. As you're seeing here, there's a draft plan of subdivision anticipated, which will have a number of planning approvals, but it's in its early stages. We've only had pre-consultation at this time, and a number of things are set to change. Skipping through these sort of briefly, what is actually predicating this meeting is a desire to move fill. It's the need to move the house in order to fill pits to the north, remove the soil that's beneath the house. And you can see this is a 25-meter difference. It's a considerable amount of fill. I'll just sort of skip through these. The reason why this subdivision is in flux, and indeed there are a number of reasons, but one large one is the fact that a school site needs to be identified on the plan. This is just to demonstrate the scale of what that school site might be, and it might need to be in the location where the house currently is. So we will need to find an alternative location for it, both in the interim and possibly in the long term as well. I think that's the necessary context I had hoped to speak to in terms of planning approvals process. But I'd also just like to take this opportunity, if I have 10 more seconds, to thank staff for working collaboratively with us in light of some changes that came to us on Thursday of last week from the province. They were nimble, they were available, and is very much appreciated, and we're looking forward to continued collaboration on these matters as we move through this. Developing the covenant agreement that's been recommended, and ultimately moving the house, finding the right place for it, and restoring it to its original grandeur. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, and we do appreciate your comments. So I'm going to open it to our committee members if members have questions for the delegation on either of the items, and then we'll ask staff any questions. So are there any questions for the delegation? Natalie.
Thank you so much for your very thorough presentation. Just for the future of the house, since there are additions, I'm assuming they were cut out to be able to be used in one home. How are they going to be restructured? How are they going to be redone with the gaps that the additions have caused?
So there were just two doorways from the original log structure that led to those additions. One was the original opening in the log structure, and the second was the opening that was cut in with a chainsaw in 1966. There's no other connection to the additions. So I don't know if that answers that question, but
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Are there other questions? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Councillor Michaud, did you want to speak? I notice your microphone is on, so why don't you go first?
Thank you. I don't know. Yeah, it is on. I just spoke. Okay. Is it okay if I go? I just want some clarification, and it could come from Mr. Vendor or staff. The covenant agreement or intention to designate, what's the difference? Or is there a difference?
Through you, Chair, I can provide that response. So a designating bylaw is designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and it's what we most commonly bring to the committee, to Heritage Kitchener Committee, in both the Municipal Heritage Register review process when we're proposing to designate buildings, as well as previously under the 4-step council-adopted listing process where many of those review properties were listed. We drafted a very basic statement of significance that could be used as a designating bylaw. Once a designating bylaw is on title of a property, it regulates change that might negatively impact the heritage attributes. So, for instance, this evening, I believe there's 3 permits this evening. We've heard 2 of the heritage permits, so they required to submit a heritage permit when alteration is proposed that is likely to impact the heritage attributes of a building. The agreements, whether it's a covenant agreement or an easement agreement, they will also contain a statement of significance and a list of heritage attributes. They do not require heritage permits, but they still require approvals through staff. Typically, we use these agreements in advance of a designating bylaw as an interim form of conservation to allow longer processes that require extensive change to occur, similar to Mrs. Price's reference to planning applications. Often what happens is, as part of a planning application, we use an agreement to direct how a heritage resource will be conserved. And at the tail end of a planning process, we then designate the property. So the intent would be, in the interim, we would enter into this agreement with the property owner, and then in the long term, at some point, there won't be a need for the agreement, and we would propose designation.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. So basically, and it was a long explanation, so forgive me if I didn't get it all. The next question I have are basically, would the covenant agreement hold up the process of moving this house to another location so that the production of new home building and the whole plan get expedited, could it get going? This is I think they said almost a 20-year project so far. So how much of a holdup would the covenant agreement do instead of an intention to designate? Is that?
So the covenant agreement is a tool we're using because there is no planning application before the city.
Okay, so what kind of a time frame are we looking with the covenant agreement then to get? Does it mean every step they take, does it have to go through planning and get approved? Is there approvals at every single step, or can they start the process of making plans to move this property?
So through the chair, yes, the intent is, as part of the covenant, we would work through the processes to demolish the additions and to provide a process for the temporary relocation. And then I suspect we both would anticipate a formal decision regarding a long-term site would be part of a planning application.
So what kind of time frame are we looking at here for this then? Just an estimate, if you could.
So I'm not sure I understand your question. The covenant agreement will place obligations on between the city and the property owner, and some of those obligations will require certain studies. So we've identified in both the original staff report I wrote, as well as in the memo, that there are certain studies that need to be completed before the building, the demolition can occur, and before the building can be moved. Those studies have already been issued to the applicant via terms of reference. And so once those studies are submitted, we would review them and facilitate moving the process forward. We acknowledge and understand that the applicant is hoping to be in a position to deal with the grading in August, and we are hopeful that that is a timeline that all parties can work towards. The latter half of your question with respect to planning applications, until we have a planning application, I don't know that I can respond to those timelines.
Fair enough, thank you.
Michelle, what you have explained and what we have before us with the revision, it's similar to the other examples that Schlegel Properties have gone through with housing, with the restoring of houses and moving them and so on. Is it not what we're now proposing?
Through you, Chair, I would say it is similar. So Typically, my experience with Vaughn and his team has been around draft plans of subdivisions under the Planning Act. And through those processes, they have required to undertake studies like a heritage impact assessment, like they shared vibration monitoring. And those conditions required are entrenched in the subdivision agreement. In this current scenario, because there is no planning application, staff were contemplating what tools we could use to again, require those studies just like we would as part of a Planning Act application. And initially, because of Bill 23, it was my belief that the best recommendation would be to designate, because it really was the only tool available, especially given Bill 23's deadline of the end of this year. Bill 200 was not expected, and it went through the legislature quite quickly in under 2 weeks and received royal assent on Thursday, and that provided an opportunity for me to reconsider my initial recommendation to connect with my team and with Vaughn's team and propose this alternate option, which my understanding is both parties agree to.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any other questions for the delegation? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the, like if I'm reading the report properly. So you plan to move the house right now to another location in the property so you can grade it properly, but your plan is to keep it on the property, is that correct?
I can answer that in parts, I guess. Yeah, so when we started this first meeting with Michelle out on site, and then later, I think it was April the 26th, we met with Michelle and Garrett and Sandro and so on. We've talked about, I think we've been consistent in what we've talked about. We'd like to embark on a process to have agreement and approvals and the necessary agreements in place to move the structure to a temporary resting spot until the ultimate final location can be determined. There was some suggestion in conversation that, you know, it's best to have the full plan at one time. And we had, and I made a list here of the ideas we had talked about. First, of course, is an opportunity to move it and then relocate it back to somewhere within the new community, which, as it's been described, is still in a state of flux as it goes through the draft approval process. We locate a high school and all those other moving parts. We suggested, you know, Steckley Heritage Farm, Dune Heritage Village at the Ken Sealing Museum, the Williamsburg Town Center, the park, where there's a community garden evolving, where there's, you know, skating facility and what have you. We also suggested a property which we have, the St. Jacobs Market District, where we have a log structure in the Mennonite Story, where we have, you know, a newly constructed trail is locating or connects the city of Waterloo to the market and beyond. We've got a train stop there. We've got requests from cycling associations for a bike rental or borrowing location, or we've had discussions with the Township of Woolwich around a visitor center and tourism type activity. So some type of a use where it might be seen from both the exterior and the interior by many people in the future. So we were hoping to discuss those ideas and options in, I'll say, a non-pressurized environment. The pressure is on for us to move through the site alteration permit process to facilitate the movement of 300,000 cubic meters of material to the gravel pit bottoms to the north of our site, where their draft approvals are in place and those neighborhoods are moving forward to construction right now. So, and the other thing, if I may, just to add to what Michelle was saying, we are in agreement, I should have said that at the outset, we are in agreement with respect to this process of a Heritage Covenant agreement. And I know there's discussion about Heritage Covenant versus Heritage Easement, which I don't want to suggest it's a minor terminology difference, but we're in discussions about the difference between that. You know, we entered into a Heritage Covenant agreement on the EB project before we moved the house. To be honest, I can't remember, but I suspect we were not draft approved when we moved that structure. I really can't remember anymore. We did enter into a covenant agreement. Then we carried out, the move, restorations, and the house was designated many years later. It was, though, published as a notice of intention to designate back at the time that we entered into the covenant agreement. So what Michelle is describing is exactly what we've done before, and that was our hope at the beginning. Let's go through the processes we're familiar with, because we want to get to the outcome that we agree upon. I don't think we've settled on a final location yet, but we're open to input and dialogue and collaboration on that. We know we don't decide that on our own, but the buildings that are at Dune Heritage Crossroads come from different townships and different places. Buildings on other sites have been moved and used for different purposes. On the district park, it's now a washroom facility. So to me, there's an opportunity for discussion, but we did not wish to have a predetermined outcome. The thing was, we knew anything to do with, Steckley Heritage Farm or the Dune Crossroad would take a long time to work out. The St. Jacobs Farmers Market we own and control, and so we could do that in 6 months.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have one more
Yeah, yeah.
follow-up?
yeah, I have another question. I'll have a question for staff in a moment, but as far as interior heritage attributes of in this house, I mean, were there any? Because right now it's pretty gutted, right?
Oh, sorry, I thought you said that was a question for
No,
staff.
I will have a question for staff in a moment, but I just
I can help you
was
with
wondering about there's nothing left in the interior, but were there? Like, was this
There was
considered?
one bedroom that had its original plaster walls on it and window surrounds and door frames. The balance of the ground floor, second floor was all replaced back in the 70s by the Hennifer family. And those original pieces are still in place in the house, as it is today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll just quickly go to questions for staff. Any questions for staff? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the question about the final location of the house. So I guess my question to you is, will it come back to us, or will it go back to council when, with a proposal of where it might end up, or that's through delegated authority?
Through you, Chair, the relocation of the house to a permanent setting, I would anticipate being part of a planning application where we would have a heritage impact assessment, which we would bring to Heritage Kitchener for input and consideration, and then we would seek comments from the committee on the recommendations provided on a permanent location for the log house.
Okay, and I just hope that, between staff and the developers, we can keep it on site. I think that that's part of the value of the heritage building itself, right? It's not just those logs, but it's where it's been for all these many, many years. So I hope, I would much prefer to see that arrangement. So thank you.
Thank you. And I would affirm that as well. It's very good to have it in the vicinity. It gives context to the community. And believe it or not, the newcomers do have a lot of interaction with these heritage buildings. All right, with that, I'm going to go to the recommendation in the staff report that was under 4.3, that in accordance with Section 27.3 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the notice of intention to demolish partial received on April 26, 2024 regarding the circa 1920-1930 addition and the two circa 1960 additions located on the property municipally addressed as 236 Gale Place be received for information, and that the notice period run its course. So who would move that? Councillor Chapman will. And are there any further questions? If not, all those in favor? Unanimous. And I would say it goes to council for approval June 24th. Right. Now, the second item has to do with a revised recommendation that was circulated in a memo in advance of the meeting. And I'll read it. Again, it's a long one. That pursuant to Section 37(1) of the Ontario Heritage Act, City Council authorized the entering into of a heritage conservation covenant or easement agreement with the owner of 236 Gale Place in a form and content satisfactory to the city solicitor and the city's Director of Development and Housing Approvals, and further, that the draft bylaw dated June 10, 2024, attached to Development Services Department internal memo dated June 7, 2024, as Appendix A, to allow the city to enter into a heritage conservation covenant or easement agreement with the owner of the lands described as LT 144 German Company Tract Kitchener, PTLT 143 German Company Tract Kitchener, as in 368142, T/W 368142, partially released by WR 154625. Kitchener being all of PIN 22728-0027 LT, and currently municipally addressed as 236 Gale Place, for the conservation of the log house be adopted. Who is moving that? Councillor Michaud. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. It is a beautiful structure that you have on your property, and we hope to see it in its focus in the future, whenever that might be, probably a couple years down the road. Thank you. All right, our second, 4.5, notice of intention to designate 56 Duke Street West under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2024-242. Diksha Chowdhury, Heritage Planner, will provide a brief presentation and overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next item in the agenda is the notice of intention to designate 56 Duke Street West under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The designation is coming forward as part of the ongoing Build 23 initiative that is being undertaken by the city. The statement of significance for the property was updated and brought before the committee at its April 2024 meeting, and the committee decided that designation be pursued. The subject property is located on the north side of Duke Street West between Yonge Street and Ontario Street North. So the property was assessed against OREG 906, and it was determined that it meets 5 out of 9 criteria and is recognized for its design value, historical associative and contextual values. The property is a representative style of Gothic architectural style and a bit unique in terms of its architecture and decorative features. The building was completed in 1922, is 2.5 stories in height, and is in good condition with many intact elements, including its brick construction, projecting porticos, Gothic windows, and round windows with tracery. The building has associative value for being constructed as a presbytery for the St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church. The building till today is being used by the church. The church also has associative value for being designed by Charles Nechtel, who was a prominent architect in Kitchener and in the region for more than 40 years. More than 100 buildings within the region are attributed to him, including churches, schools, commercial offices, and private residences. The property also has contextual value as it is important in maintaining and supporting the character of an area. It's located in its original location on the block bounded by Duke Street West, Yonge Street, Weber Street, and Ontario Street within the church, and it is physically, historically, and visually linked to its surroundings. As a result of this evaluation, staff are recommending that the notice of intention to designate proceed. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Diksha. Any questions for Diksha with respect to this property? In the correspondence in the write-up, I noted that there was due process in informing the owner of what is going to happen, and there did not seem to be any response back from the owner.
That's right, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now, I would like to read the recommendation. Pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 56 Duke Street West as being of cultural heritage value or interest. Who will move that? Natalie, thank you. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Our next item is 1115 Pandora Avenue North under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act for intention to designate. And Michelle Drake, Senior Planner, will provide a brief presentation overview. Thank you, Michelle.
Through you, Chair, 11 to 15 Pandora Avenue North is a two-story 19th century building. The building is constructed in the Italianate architectural style and is situated on a 0.18 acre parcel of land located on the east side of Pandora Avenue North between Duke Street East and King Street East in the King Street planning community. The principal resource that contributes to the heritage value is the residential Italianate building. As part of the Municipal Heritage Register review process, the property was evaluated against the current criteria and found to meet 3 of the 9 criteria. The design and physical value relate to the building and the Italianate architectural style. The building has many intact original elements that are in good condition. Features that represent the Italianate architectural style include the asymmetrical plan, the 2-story height with attic, the truncated hip roof with cross gables, as well as the central hip roof that leads to the clerestory windows above. The molded fascia, plain cornice, and paneled frieze, along with the paired brackets. Segmentally arched door on the south elevation, as well as its decorative hood crown, projecting center bays on the west elevation, a 1.5-story addition, which was the original servants' quarters, the yellow brick construction, brick coining on the corners, segmentally hung windows on most elevations of the building with decorative hood molds, brick voussoirs and stone sills, and a rubble stone foundation. The historical and associative value relate to the history and association with early settlement, prominent pioneer Mennonite families, the Ebys and the Erbs, including Bishop Benjamin Eby, Reverend Mose Erb, Menno Erb, and early businesses such as Erb & Co. Glove Works, Brown & Erb, etc. Bishop Benjamin Eby and his wife Marie bought Lot 2 German company tract when they came to Canada in 1807. The first building on the property was a log house that stood west of the First Mennonite Church, where Bishop Eby was a spiritual leader, teacher, and preacher. By 1830, he had built a frame house. Over the years, Bishop Eby and his descendants sold off parcels of Lot 2. One parcel of Lot 2 was purchased by Reverend Moses Erb in 1862 from the executors of Reverend Christian Erb, son of Bishop Eby. Moses Erb was born in Waterloo County in 1821. He was ordained Mennonite minister for the Martin and Bloomingdale Fields of Labor. He married Susanna Rosenberger in 1841, and they moved to the Bishop Eby farm in 1860, when he was placed on the Berlin circuit. They moved along with their children, Menno, Aaron, and Moses. The oldest son, Menno Erb, married Lydia Bricker, and together they had 4 children. Menno became a large landowner when he bought the Bishop Eby farm from his father in 1867. He continued to operate the cider mill, with a large orchard being located between the farm buildings and the Mennonite meeting house and the cemetery. The Berliner Journal of October 31st, 1878 noted that Menno Erb had built for $2,500 on King Street end of town a 2-story brick house in the Italianate style. The house originally faced King Street east. Menno Erb was the head of M. Erb & Co. Glove Works on King Street and the largest shareholder in Erb Glove. He was also in partnership with C.F. Brown, Brown & Erb, which was one of the finest and most prominent furniture houses in the country. Menno Erb and his family sold the building in 1881 when they moved to the corner of Foundry, now Ontario, and Weber Street. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. Any questions for Michelle on this property? Seeing none, I will read the recommendation. Pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 11-15 Pandora Avenue North as being of cultural heritage value or interest. Who will move it? Donnie, thank you. Any further questions? All in favor? Motion carried unanimously. And now we will proceed. Bill 23, Municipal Heritage Register Review, June 2024, update. And Diksha, you will provide a brief presentation overview. We have 6 properties, and I take it that, Diksha, you will be presenting, some of the other, Jessica and Michelle. All right, so Diksha, would you please present? I guess you start off with 51 Brideup. Very good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first property that we'll be reviewing today is 51 Brideup. It's located on the south side of Brideup at the corner of Brideup and Waterloo. The property has been evaluated and staff have concluded that the property meets 5 out of 9 criteria, is recognized for its design, physical, historical, associative, and contextual value, and should be recommended for designation. So the subject property contains a series of buildings that were built between 1903 and 1977. They range in height from 1 story to 4 stories, with the original buildings and additions being built in the industrial vernacular architectural style. Certain architectural features of the site include, but are not limited to, the brick buttresses, stone sills and headers on windows, and the brick parapet with decorative brick detailing. The building has undergone extensive changes, but still maintains its overall massing in style and integrity. The site has historical and associative value for its original use and owner of the property, the Merchant Rubbers Company Limited, Jacob Kaufman, and Talman Henry Ryder. The site also has historical and associative value due to its contribution to the economic development of Kitchener, then Berlin, at the start of 20th century. It was built at a time when Berlin was experiencing exponential economic growth and has the potential to yield an understanding of the state of the economic development of Berlin at the turn of the century. 51 Brideup Street also has contextual value because it's important in maintaining and supporting the character of an area. The site is located within the Warehouse District Cultural Heritage Landscape and near other industrial buildings that were built parallel to the Canadian National Railway's track. The building remains in their original locations, along with many other original industrial sites nearby. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Diksha. And I do believe that it's a really good example of adaptive reuse and a new addition and all the things you hope to see. Great. All right. 1478, the Huron Road Bank Barn, is that the next one? Who would be doing that?
Through you, Jean, there is 2 addresses on Trustler, and one of the addresses relates to the Huron Road Bank Barn.
Okay, so which is up next then?
I believe 1478 Tressler Road is the next
Very good.
item.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, the property municipally addressed as 1478 Tressler Road is a mid-19th century log house, or suspected log house, originally built in the Georgian architectural style with later additions featuring minor influences from the Gothic Revival architectural style. The building is situated on a 87.59 acre parcel of land located on the east side of Tressler Road between Bleems and Huron Road in the Rosenberg planning community. The principal resources that contribute to the heritage value are the house, the smokehouse, the laneway, and surrounding agricultural fields. The property demonstrates design physical value as a rare and early example of a mid-19th century log house built in the Georgian architectural style, with later additions featuring minor influences from the Gothic Revival architectural style. The front gable with lancet window likely dates to the late 19th century. The return eaves and lancet window were lost when the roof was rebuilt in 1938. In 1949, the veranda was removed and the present sun porch was added. The entire house was covered with insule brick and more recently aluminum siding. The property also demonstrates design physical value as a well-conserved example of a smokehouse. The smokehouse features brick construction, front gable roof, and interior slats along the ceiling with attached hooks. The subject property has historical and associative value due to its history and association with early settlement and the Tressler family. Thomas George Tressler was born on December 10, 1831 in Fernhurst, Sussex, England. His obituary shares that Mr. Tressler emigrated with his parents to Canada in 1833, where they took up residence on the town line between Wilmot and Waterloo. In 1860, he was married to Miss Hannah Townsend. They then lived on a farm adjoining his father's. Thomas Tressler, son of George and brother of George Gilbert, purchased Lot 145 of the German Company tract from his father in 1861 and replaced the small log house where he had lived at the corner of Huron Tressler Roads and later moved and inhabited by his brother, with a larger log building on his new property. A family photograph shows that by circa 1880, the house had been covered with wood or brick siding, characteristically stuccoed under the front veranda. Behind the house, one can just glimpse a back kitchen wing. Thomas's daughter, Alicia, bought the farm from her father in 1891, and she and her sister, Minnie, lived there and managed the farm until 1899. Alicia sold the farm in 1899. For the next couple of decades, it was tenanted or owned by a number of different persons. In 1917, Oscar Tressler bought the farm, and in 1934, Oscar's son Robert and his wife moved into his great-uncle's house. It stayed in the Tressler family until 2011. My apologies, I did not advance the slide, but that is the criteria related to design, physical value, as well as the historic associative value. The contextual value relates to the physical, functional, visual, and historic links between the log house, the smokehouse, and surrounding farmland. Although the barn and the most outbuildings connected with the farming are now gone, the log house is still situated in its original location. It faces south and is set back from Tressler Road on a slight incline. The surrounding lands were traditionally used for mixed farming with 2 apple orchards. The original smokehouse is located adjacent to the east facade of the house and was once used to smoke ham and sausages. Because this property meets criteria for designation, we are recommending that the committee consider providing direction to move forward with a notice of intention to designate. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. The next one.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to swing a bit here. All right, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I'm just interested to learn more about this heritage contextual value mentioned here when referring to the surrounding agricultural fields. Like we just saw a property on Gale Place, right? And there was no mention of the surrounding properties. I just wondered what makes this one, what gives this one heritage contextual value in particular.
Through you, Chair, this area of the city is outside of the urban area, and so it is surrounded on all sides by rural properties and farming properties. I think the difference with the previous file regarding 236 Gale Place is that it is adjacent to urban area and is intended to be urban area. It does have a relationship to the agricultural landscape to the south and the west. Those comments were shared with the applicant. The one slight difference is that the scoped HIA, we asked that it only be reviewed in the context of the additions. So when they come back with their full HIA, which evaluates the log house, I have asked them to look at the context of the log house. And so there should be some references to what that landscape presently includes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, next. The item is, which address, please?
Through you, Chair, the next item, which I can maybe do together, is the 1738 Trustler Road and then the Huron Road property. They are related, they just are under different ownership. And it might be helpful for me to work through both properties for the committee to consider. So
Please go ahead.
Through you, Chair. So 1738 Trustler Road is a 1.5-story late 19th century brick farmhouse built in the Ontario Gothic Revival style. The property on Huron Road is a late 19th century farm with outbuildings. So on the map, what I've done is I've outlined in red the municipal boundaries or the legal boundaries of 1738 Trustler Road, and then I've outlined in green the legal boundary of the Huron Road property, which has a very long legal description. So I will refer to it as the Huron Road property for the purposes of my presentation. The farmhouse is situated on just about an acre parcel of land located on the east side of Trustler Road between Huron Road and Plains Road, while the outbuildings are situated on about a 62-acre parcel of land located at the southeast corner of Trustler Road and Huron Road in the South Plains Planning Community. The principal resources that contribute to the heritage value for 1738 Trustler Road is the farmhouse, although the contextual value does relate to those adjacent outbuildings, specifically the barn, which is located on the Huron Road property. So 1738 Trustler Road, which is that smaller parcel, and it contains, as I mentioned, the Gothic Revival farmhouse. It has that design and physical value as a representative example of a late 19th century brick farmhouse built in the Ontario Gothic Revival architectural style. The 1851 manuscript census suggests that a one-story log structure was covered or possibly replaced by this existing building. The building has many intact heritage attributes in good condition. When reviewing the criteria for designation, we found that the property has design and physical value. as indicated by the previous slide. With respect to historical and associative value, the history and association with early settlement, Daniel and Jacob Erb, Joseph Bamberger, John Chapman, Reuben Eby, Simon Hallman, and the Trussler family. And we just heard quite a bit about the Trussler family. So in this instance, Daniel and Jacob Erb sold the land to Joseph Bamberger in 1805, who sold it to John Chapman in 1848. John Chapman Sr. was born in 1811. He came to Canada from England in the mid-1840s with his wife Lydia and children. A third child, John Jr., was born in Upper Canada in 1846. The 1851 manuscript census indicates that the Chapman family resided in a one-story log structure. It is assumed that the brick structure either replaced or covered the log structure. John Chapman sold the land to Reuben Eby in 1907, who then sold it to Simon Hallman in 1930, and then passed those lands on to his wife in 1955, and then finally the lands were sold to the Trussler family in 1977, and the most recent change in property ownership occurred in 1994. With respect to contextual values, that relate to how the property helps to maintain and support the rural character of the area. The farmhouse remains on its original location. A board and batten front gable garage contributes to the character of the property, along with the cedar hedges delineating three sides of the property. The farmhouse is visually and historically linked to its surroundings, namely the rural farm property that contains the original barn and the original drive shed. The property, that adjacent property is addressed off of Huron Road, and as I mentioned earlier, is identified as the green outline in the map. So the Huron Road property is, again, the larger parcel identified by the green. As you can see on the slide, a very lengthy legal description that I suspect you don't want me to read, but it includes the bank barn, the drive shed, the agricultural fields once associated with the farmhouse that is municipally addressed to 1738 Trussler Road. So the property demonstrates design physical value as a representative example of late 19th century bank barn and drive shed. The buildings have many intact heritage tributes that are in good condition. And as previously noted, the original farmhouse is located north of the bank barn and drive shed on a separate parcel of land. The subject property has historic and associative value, again, due to its history and association with early settlement. Daniel and Jacob Erb, Joseph Bamberger, John Chapman, Reuben Eby, Simon Hallman, and the Trussler family. And it shares that same description as the first property, with the exception of the lands. There has not been a land transfer since 1977. Or change in ownership, I should say. The contextual values relate to how the property helps to maintain and support the rural character of the area. The lands continue to be cultivated. Other heritage attributes that contribute to the contextual value are the cluster of built features, including the farmhouse, the bank barn, and the drive shed, the windbreak adjacent to the property municipally addressed as 2006 Huron Road, the cultivated fields and their topography, the mature woodlot, and the spatial organization and visual and historic relationship between the buildings and the landscape elements. Specifically, the bank barn and drive shed are visually and historically linked to their surroundings, namely the farmhouse at 1738 Trussler Road. Again, staff have reviewed the property, and as it meets the criteria for designation, are recommending that the committee consider directing staff to pursue a notice of intent to designate. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. Seeing no questions, that's fine. We need to move on to 103-109 King Street West. Jessica, you're waving at me. Are you doing this one? Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next property we're looking at for our Municipal Heritage Register review is 709 King Street West, also known as King Edward Public School. Our assessment determined that this one meets 5 of the 9 criteria and that it possesses design and physical, historical, associative, and contextual values. So 709 King Street West does meet criteria 1, being a representative example of the neoclassical architectural style as seen in its characteristics such as the symmetrical massing, which follows the classic Georgian forms, as well as its grand scale and refined detailing. It does not, however, meet criteria 2, as well it does possess craftsmanship and artistic detailing. It's nothing beyond what's typically seen in the neoclassical style, which is characterized by ornamental detailing. It also doesn't demonstrate any high degree of technical or scientific achievement, as it seems to be constructed using materials and methods that were common to the early 20th century. The property does, however, have direct association with the local school board and themes of education and population growth within the area, being the second established public school within the city after Sudbury Public School, which is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And so it's the second longest running school within the city. It also was attended to by notable educators such as Janet Metcalf, who established the first kindergarten in all of Ontario. With this history, it does yield to us an understanding of the development of the educational system and our population growth within the city. It can't be said that criteria 6 is met, as the architect and builder is unknown, but it does meet criteria 7 and 8, having contextual value, being that it's located in situ and continues to support the surrounding area, maintaining its original use. Mount Hope and Breithaupt, the neighborhoods are immediately to the north, and then the Gildner and Grun neighborhoods are Mount Hope and Breithaupt is to the north, and then Gildner and Grun is to the south and the west. These are long-term established neighborhoods, and part of what contributes to that status is the presence of services for those communities, like the schools, fire hall, places of worship, and so on. So that's where its contextual value lies. It can't necessarily be said that this is a landmark, though. While it is definitely a distinctive building, it is set back far from the property line and hidden by trees, and there are a number of other notable buildings within the area, including the designated Kitchener-Waterloo Collegiate School, which is just down the street, so it can't be said that criteria 9 is met. And that concludes my presentation for 709 King Street West.
Thank you, Jessica. Any questions? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, so when it comes to an institution of this sort, and if it gets designated, then I presume they have to comply with all the heritage designated rules and regulations, right? When it comes to new windows or any work that gets done on the building, is that correct?
So through you, Madam Chair, I would like to note that it's only the front portion of the building that we're proposing to be included in the designating bylaw. That's a 1921's addition, so it wouldn't include any of the rear addition that was built in the 60s. I would also like to note as well, in my wording for this designating bylaw, I haven't specifically identified these windows because not all of these windows are original. Was changes, even if you look on Google Maps, you can see that the windows changed, or several of them did change, even as recently as 2020. So while I included wording such as like the presence of multi-paned windows, it would just mean that if replacements are needed, they would have to be multi-paned windows, but they don't necessarily have to be exact replicas of these windows.
Right.
So we do make concessions like that.
Yeah, because you'd hate to think that a school would be compromised because of designation. Although I think it's a beautiful building and we should designate it, but okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. I would like to note too, we do have other designated schools. Like I mentioned, there's the Kitchener-Waterloo Collegiate School just down the street that is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And then there's also Sudbury Public School, which was the first school in Kitchener, is designated as well.
Thank you. So we'll now go to 103, 109 King Street West. Jessica, you're doing that one.
So through our review, we've determined that 103 to 109 King Street West meets 4 of the 9 criteria under Ontario Regulation 906 and is identified as having design and physical, historical, associative, and contextual values as well. So it's determined to have design value as it's a representative example of the classical revival architectural style as seen in its ordered, proportionate, and symmetrical massing, as well as the repetitive fenestration. It does not necessarily, though, to degree a display of craftsmanship or artistic merit beyond what's typical for the classic revival architectural style, and it doesn't demonstrate any particularly notable construction methods or use any different material than what's commonly seen in construction in the early 20th century. This building is said to have historical and associative value, being associated with the Freemasons community in the city of Kitchener, as it is the former home to the Grand River Lodge 151. The Freemasons are the largest and oldest fraternity in the world, and a number of our notable residents have been a part of this community. It can't be said, though, that it contributes an understanding or yields further information about the Freemason community, and the architect and builder is unknown. It does have contextual value, though, and contributes to the King Street landscape, being in its original location and within the downtown cultural heritage landscape, which is an area characterized by a mix of commercial and other uses. It does maintain similar massing, scale, and setback as the surrounding buildings, and it cannot be said that this property is a landmark. That concludes my presentation for this one.
Thank you, Jessica. Any questions on this item?
Yes, I have a question. Go ahead.
Michaud, Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to see the buildings on King Street be highlighted here. I'm just curious, and you may not be able to answer this, but how many more buildings along King need to be or can be identified, or are we getting close to identifying them all?
I believe a number of our King Street ones have already been brought forward. I know the buildings immediately adjacent to I think that would have been the west, have been brought forward to the committee already by Michelle a couple months ago. So almost that whole block is either already designated or we're in the process of designating it. Most of our King Street properties were in our high priority list, which we identified during our prioritization exercise in February last year. And I know we're almost completely done all those high priority properties.
It's really great to see. I was in Calgary last week and sitting along there, King Street, just having a coffee, looking up and seeing the facade and seeing it. All these old buildings have been preserved and identified. It just adds such character to the downtown. So it's really nice. Thanks. Good job. Good work.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Chapman?
My question was the same, so thank you.
Any other questions? I'm sorry, Shannon, do you have one? No, thank you. All right. With respect to time, I just will make comments that as you send the information to the owners and an observation of those properties and the owners to be approached, I anticipate that we will have some challenges and perhaps some negotiation on how we're going to look at designation, if designation is to occur, particularly out in the rural area. And it's good to see that this is recognized, and it's very important as part of the City of Kitchener's heritage. So I'm going to read the recommendation that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the cultural heritage value or interest be recognized and designation be pursued for the following properties: 51 Brightup Street, Huron Road, which is the bank, barn, drive, shed, agricultural fields associated with the Ontario Gothic Revival Farmhouse, municipally addressed as 1738 Trusler Road. 1478 Trustler Road, 1738 Trustler Road, 103-109 King Street West, and 709 King Street West. So could I have someone to move this recommendation? Thank you, Andrew. Any further questions? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. And now any information items. We're just about at the end. I'd just like to bring up two notices that we have. September 21, which is Saturday, it's the Doors Open Waterloo Region. And perhaps you can volunteer at a site for a bit of time. And we have the Waterloo County Jail and Governor's House up in Queen Street. There are churches, there's the Fashion History Museum in Cambridge, libraries, a log schoolhouse, coin society, a distillery, a cheese-making place out in Wilmot Township. So it promises to be quite an interesting day. And then October 5th, the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario North Waterloo Branch is planning to have a bus tour and explore heritage conservation districts. St. Mary's District, Upper Dune, and then out in the country in New Hamburg and the Greenfield and Ayr area. And they promise to have a great lunch at a local pub. So you might want to keep that in your calendars. Any other comments? I know Diana's patiently waiting because we have to be out of here at 6 o'clock. Any other comments? Oh, I guess this concludes until August for the summer break. Are there any assessments that the committee has to do or that someone is going to contact us with work to do over the summer? Is there any comment, Garrett or Jessica or Diksha or Michelle?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think during the presentation, Michelle talked a bit about Build 200. So the deadline has been extended for another 2 years. So we are looking at our current work plan and adding properties to be reviewed during this 2-year extension. So if we need further assessments to be done for the properties, we will be reaching out to the committee.
Right. It was a welcome relief to see that date extended, and thanks to council that they did write the motion and many others across Ontario to extend the date to 2030. However, we're up to 2027, January 1st. That's good. And I hope that we continue on. I know it's a lot of pressure, but we have a lot of properties that do deserve recognition, and we'll look at that. Now, is there someone that would be willing to adjourn the meeting? Natalie would. Thank you very much.